Let's go through three possible outcomes of the federal elections and what they would mean for you and your family when it comes to estate and gift tax planning. So I think a really important point is just because a candidate proposes tax changes does not mean they're going to become law. I think former President Obama had many proposals that never became law. He was president for 8 years. And why is that? Well, because of our system of governance. You need a law to change. It has to pass the Congress, it has to pass the Senate, and it has to be signed by the president. So if any one of those three is not like the other, it is very unlikely that laws change, right? And I think very importantly, when it comes to estate and gift tax planning, if there's gridlock, the current law, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017, it sunsets at the end of 2025. And so if there's no change, the current law sunsets, and we'll talk about what that would mean. But I think that's important to understand. So I think, again, one party has to control all three branches for there to be a change in law or for things to change in a dramatic way. So these proposals are just proposals, but they're not going to happen unless the president has the Congress and the Senate on their side as well. So let's talk about the three different scenarios. Let's say that the GOP, the Republican Party, sweeps, that Donald Trump wins the presidency, the GOP retains control of the Senate and maintains control of Congress. And at the time of this presentation, who knows about the presidency? It looks slightly more likely from what I've seen that the GOP will control the Senate. Congress looks like it's leaning Democrat, who knows? So if the GOP sweeps, that means that Donald Trump's ideas have a much higher likelihood of being enacted into law. And the most likely thing here is that the Tax Cut and Jobs Act will be extended and either made permanent or just extended for a number of years. I'm not an expert on the nuances there. But what does that mean? It means that this 2026 cliff, the December 31st, 2025, January 1st, 2026 cliff, when the estate tax exemption is without a change in law, it's set to drop by 50% from 10 million indexed to inflation to 5 million indexed to inflation. If the GOP sweeps, we believe that they will at least extend the current law, meaning there will be no cliff. The same scenario that we're at now, the same rules that we're at now will continue. That's probably the most likely outcome. Now, just to be clear, though, even if the GOP wins all three branches, this presidency, the Senate, and the Congress, that doesn't mean they'll get their act together to pass a new law or to extend this. We've seen a lot of dysfunction even within the Republican Party. You have the Freedom Caucus and the more moderates, and there's a lot of party infighting. So they would need to all be completely unified to do this. Now, in Donald Trump's first term, they did get unified and they had a slight majority everywhere and they did pass the new law. So that's a very real possibility. If Republicans win all three, maybe there won't even be a 2026 cliff and we won't have these urgent deadlines, although we still might. Mike, walk us through what would another scenario with the Democrats winning all three branches.
So what if Vice President Harris becomes president and the Democrats control, at least nominally, the Senate and the House? What would be the logical outcomes? At minimum, the current law will be allowed to terminate. The cliff will happen. We summarized the other proposals that would much more dramatically limit opportunities to avoid the estate tax. So those proposals will likely see the light of day. Whether they would be acted upon ever or quickly, Mark's already correctly pointed out that you just never know. You look at the infighting in the two parties, and it's hard to imagine agreement on virtually anything. And something I've always noted about tax rules and tax laws, every member of Congress is a built-in lobbyist, right? He or she has a family. They have assets. So they're thinking about themselves, too. So would there be unanimity on the part of the Democratic Party to pass some of these proposals that have been put on the table by the campaign? I just don't know. Have to point out there has been some discussion, although it's really not been paramount, that there could even be legislation proposed that would make the changes retroactive to like January 1, 2025. That would take very quick action by the Senate and by the House, and the president would have to be very proactive. But that means that some of the opportunities could disappear even sooner than the cliff that we're worried about at the very end of 2025. We don't really see that. Again, the challenges there, the details that would have to be addressed, the herding of the cats, which within the Senate and the House, very hard to imagine, but it could happen. It could happen.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that for Biden's first 2 years, he did have Democratic Senate and Democratic Congress, and they did not pass a tax reform bill. They did not change the current rules. So just even if Democrats control all three branches, that's absolutely no guarantee, as Mike said, that things will change. But the flip side, as he pointed out, we might have a deadline coming up a lot sooner than we think. So we can't predict that, but we can at least be prepared as best we can. So now let's talk about what, again, this is not a total prediction, but what I think is probably most likely, and that is a split. So what if Democrats win the presidency and the Congress, but Republicans control the Senate, or Republicans control the presidency and Democrats control the other two branches, just some sort of split. I think right now, if you look at polls and prognostications, that is the most likely outcome, that it looks like the Senate is going Republican, Congress going Democrat, and who knows, presidential. But let's just say this happens. No party wins control. Well, gridlock is guaranteed. I'm probably most confident about. If there's a split, there will be gridlock. And what does gridlock means? It means no new laws are passed, which means the current law sunsets as it is expected to do. And what does that mean from an estate and gift tax standpoint? It means we have this critical deadline coming up on December 31st, 2025, where the estate tax exemption drops. The current law sunsets, it's over, it reverts to the prior law, meaning the estate tax exemption goes down by 50%, and it is a use it or lose it scenario. So I think that's a concept we've talked a little bit about in past presentations, but the way the law is right now is if you take actions when the exemption's higher and you take advantage of the bigger numbers, it is very unlikely that there will be retroactive changes to nail you. That's never really happened historically. In theory, it could. The legislative branch has the ability to do that, but they never have historically. But if you don't take advantage of the full amount or a large amount, you lose that opportunity forever. So the most likely scenario is that we do have this January 1st or December 31st, 2025 deadline and this cliff where the state and gift tax exemption will plummet. What are some actions to take right now? I think one, just don't wait till the last minute. That's the biggest thing. Changes are almost certain to come. We'll obviously know a lot more in November 6th or 7th. But there are many strategies that we can deploy before these opportunities may be lost. There's a lot we can do, and it is a multi-million-dollar issue for many families. Even if you don't consider yourself high net worth or wealthy, just owning real estate in California, owning a home in the Bay Area or LA or Orange County or San Diego might put you close to the new limits, especially if you're single and not married, because it's $13.61 million per person. So that's doubled if you're married, but if you're not, it's just you'd only get one of those exemptions. So that's the federal. We'll talk a little bit more about some tools that we can use, but let's transition now. Let's not wait for these deadlines to come up. Contact us at gilfix.com, 650-493-807. Share this if it's your parents, your grandparents who need to see this, because you're the one who's going to get hit by these taxes, because really a lot of these are taxed when someone passes away. I hope you got a lot out of this. And regardless, hope everybody out there is, as my mom likes to say, safe, sane, and healthy. Stay healthy, everybody. And thank you so much for spending some of your time with us.